This is Hobbiton, a Minecraft survival build that I've been working on for multiple years of my life in my world that has nearly 1400 hours of playtime. Building this world and sharing it has been an incredible experience. I have grown so much through this project, and it has been such a lengthy process that after getting so many questions about it, I've decided to make a video going into how I brought this world from this to this. Hello, my name is Patrick, and if you've seen any of my videos before, then you'll know that in the past few years, I've spent a lot of time building this project, which is Hobbiton, a piece from J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy world of Middle-earth. This project is one of my favorite personal achievements, especially in Minecraft. In fact, it's probably my greatest achievement in Minecraft, and I wanted to make a video going back to the beginning and showing you how I made this project. So let's do just that, and start at the beginning. The first video that's public on my channel is a world tour and a pretty pitiful state of my world, but you have to start somewhere. That video showcases the same world you see today, just a very underdeveloped version. There was a space in my world which I wanted to build a castle in, but after clearing out all the trees, I loved how naturally hilly and green the area was, and being a massive Tolkien fan, it inspired me to build a Hobbit-themed area, which I put off for a very long time. From the beginning, I wanted to involve hobbits in my world, and my first project involving that was an island forest, which I named the Old Forest after the Old Forest in Lord of the Rings, which was a horrible build and was later abandoned and destroyed. My first real project was this giant farmland valley in the west of my world. The Shire is in the east. My idea behind this area was that it was inhabited by hobbits until a group of men crash-landed on the shores of a nearby ocean and then came to inhabit the area as well, mingled with the hobbits. Hence why there's hobbit holes mixed in, creating a mixed culture of men and halflings. During my construction of the farmland, I had built this singular hobbit hole in the hobbit area as a sort of test to see how I would make the hobbit holes and bring them to life into the world. But it wasn't until much later when I actually started making the plans for the Hobbit area and began working on it. Earliest planning was just these sketches I made, if you can even call them sketches, of rough plans of what I would do with the areas. And I quickly set on making the central point a big hill where I would make a Bag End sort of hobbit hole for myself to live in. Now you may see where this is going. Bag End, if you don't know, is the home of Bilbo and later Frodo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings, and it's the central focus of Hobbiton. So I began construction of the hill, which was entirely built customly, and I discovered making a realistic looking hill, especially in a form to fit a giant hobbit hole, was a very difficult task. So the project quickly became actually building a replica Bag End as I went to the Lord of the Rings movies and to the Hobbiton movie set, largely to guide how I was forming the shape of the hill. And so that process is what started me on decidedly recreating Hobbiton, as I thought I'd have to conform all the land to my plans to make it work, and making Hobbiton was what I really wanted to do anyways. Just approaching it at first would have been a bit too intimidating and overwhelming, but this way I worked into it. Building the hill became the absolute essential first part because the whole shape of the entire area was affected by my building of the hill in order to make it look natural, and it really is the central focus of Hobbiton, so it's incredibly important. Once I had built the front half of the hill, I actually had to build the entire interior of Bag End before I could shape the rest of the hill around it, because I had no idea how exactly big I would need to make the hill in order to fit the entire interior in there. But once I finished Bag End, I was able to complete the hill and then really start forming the entire land and manicuring all the landscape. It is important to note my use of a creative world for lots of tests and builds and details that I tried in there before I put them in my actual survival world. It was also in this world that I developed my texture pack and made the huge decision of using 3D item models, which completely transformed the way I detailed and opened up so many possibilities. And especially in the Shire, I used these absolutely everywhere. And I also had my world of custom trees. Once the front of Hobbiton was largely formed in structure, I finally began the detailing process. I mainly focused on Bag End at first, and I also built the tree on top of Bag End and the party tree because the party field is a very significant part of the build. During the detailing process, I was constantly making changes to my texture pack and tweaking things and adding things, and I really had to form it around the world as the project kept going, I was always, and still am, editing the texture pack. When I had the whole front of the hill area mostly detailed, I got a little bit burnt out of detailing and decided to go do more terraforming. This project obviously was a ton of landscaping and terraforming, probably more so than detailing. And what I usually did throughout the process was when I got burnt out of terraforming, I would do a bunch of detailing. When I got burnt out of the detailing, I do a bunch of terraforming and kept switching off. One of the big terraforming projects was behind the hill. I had this little mountain and a bunch of random terrain that I had to completely transform. It ended up looking like this before I added much detail back there. At this point in the project, I started laying out the other side of the river. This on the right was being worked on, this area on the left was being worked on, the back area behind the hill was being worked on, the giant hill to the left was being worked on, and then there was this big cliff area over here that I completely destroyed and turned into hills so that it blended in with the Shire better. There was also this area to the east of Bag End that I made based off of the Shire from Lego Lord of the Rings, and also part of the movie set.
And good Tilda. And good Tilda.
And then the west side I built inspired by a part of the Hobbiton movie set. And then there was this massive hill I made, which was really quite an extensive project, and it's based off of an area in the movie, vaguely, in this big forest area, also inspired by a part of the movie mainly. And then there's also this part to the far right which had my original hobbit hole I built there, which I eventually remade the area, which was a very difficult project, but I eventually figured out how I wanted to do it. I then built my first version of the mill, and it was at this point that I couldn't take this view anymore, so I started, finally, the massive project of building the other side of the river. Once I made a lot of progress on the other side of the river, I made the river itself, and it was at this point that I finally went and destroyed my old forest island because it was in my way. At this point I got really burnt out of the Shire build, so I went to the rest of my world, did a bunch of side projects for a while. When I finally came back to the Shire months later, I had a lot of work to do. Oh, the village. Building the village on the other side of the River of Hobbiton was a very, very difficult task because there's hardly any description of it in Tolkien's writing, and there's not really any version of it that I could use to go off of. I pretty much just had to completely build it based off of my imagination. I also used this image for inspiration, which I've always really liked, and it's really connected with my envisionment of it. There were some very specific details I wanted, so I basically just tried to plan it as best I could and then just went for it. One of the main parts was this big farm on the right side that I had envisioned, and I put it there. And of course there is the Bywater Road, which is supposed to have trees along it, and it leads east to Bywater, and along the Bywater Road is the Ivy Bush Inn, which I made later, but at this stage I made it into the Green Dragon because I didn't think I was going to be making the Ivy Bush. And then I finished all my other terraforming projects on the hillside of the river. These are some of the areas that I mined out to get dirt for the terraforming projects. And then I detailed everything, which was a long process. The last thing I did, I believe, was finish the giant hill and forest. I finished terraforming the other side of the river, connecting it up to the rest of my world, and detailing it before I reached the final first edition version of the Shire. It was at this stage when I made and uploaded my first Hobbiton video on this YouTube channel. This was about 5.5 months into the project. About 6 months after that, I had done a lot of revision. I'd redone many of the trees, I'd redecorated and redetailed many things, and I'd changed my texture pack enormously and done so much fine-tuning and additions. I also started building Overhill, the town behind the hill of Bag End, but it never really went anywhere after that, until much later. And it was at this point that my first edition Shire was in its final completed form, and I made my second Hobbiton video, which I thought was way better than the first one. And it was here that I thought my grand work was done. And I went and put this project aside for about 6 months. But the story didn't end there. It was about exactly 1 year after the start of this project that I went back through and was reminiscing, and I really was hit with the dissatisfaction of it. I think it's the inner Tolkien fan in me, but I was really not satisfied with this build. Since from the beginning I used the movie version to model how I was structuring the hill because I really needed that assistance. It made the whole project turn into sort of making a movie replica version of the Shire, which I really didn't like because I wanted it to be my own creation and I really wanted it to be a fulfillment of my imagination of Hobbiton, and this wasn't it. So it was an incredibly hard choice to make, but I began experimenting in duplicate worlds to see if I could change around the main structure to be what I imagined and not what the movie portrays. And then I decided, screw it, I was going to do a complete revision of the main structure of Hobbiton to make it more accurate to the book and especially more accurate to my imagination. Adherence to what I imagined when reading the book was definitely the main priority, and this began the next stage of this build. My main guide was these sketches I made. I tried to just draw straight out of my imagination and get down what I envisioned, which I'm not a good artist, but they actually proved to be very effective and useful. Another huge inspiration for this revision was Artacraft, the Minecraft server. I've been a big fan of their server for ages, and they're dedicated to rebuilding Middle-earth as accurate to Tolkien as possible, and their Hobbiton is incredible. I mainly used them for inspiration for the village when I redid the village. They also inspired Bagshot Row and the Old Grange and stuff like that. I also did remake the village during this period, and I redid the buildings, and this is where you'll really see the inspiration from that one photo coming through at the bridge area. Here is two different shots of the main reconstruction that took place, and obviously it's very difficult to tell what's going on, so I'll try to give it to you in a more direct manner. The left side of the hill was turned into meadows, which is described in the book, and it's over this hedge that Frodo and Pippin leave Bag End and they embark on their journey. Over here, roads were removed, Bagshot Row was moved, the party field was moved, and Bag End Gardens were expanded right here. Here's a right side view of the party field being made and Bagshot Row being moved, and this road on the right was moved to be much closer to the hill and straighter. And here's a left side view of the party field being moved to its proper place and Bagshot Row being expanded out. Here we see the old party field being completely removed and the old grange being built there instead because that's how it's meant to be. During this process, the whole slope of the hill was made much more gradual and natural, and I really like the way the whole front of Hobbiton flows now because it looks so much better than it used to. Here you can see the hill road was made much more smooth, the mill roof was redone and the mill house was built and the yard. And lastly you can see how I changed the structure of the river. The village side was brought in closer, the bridge was made smaller, and the village was reconstructed. I also redid all the buildings in Overhill, the town behind the hill. It was at this time that I changed the green dragon into the ivy bush because the ivy bush is actually supposed to be in on the road, and I expanded it a little bit. I also took quite a lot of time to completely rethink my Hobbit architectural style, and once I finally decided on something I was satisfied with, I redid all the buildings. This style was based much more off of 19th century English rural countryside style. It's very simple, but I think it looks way better. I also added a lot of textures at this point that I used to help me with this. This was also inspired by Artacraft and their brilliant designs for their Hobbit homes. So this video obviously has mainly focused on the bigger picture of this whole project. Obviously I spent an incredible amount of time detailing everything, which probably took up way more time than actually building all the landscapes. There's just not a lot I can show you of the detailing process, and obviously it's not even that important. It was mainly all just my own artistic decisions and designs. I tried to be very purposeful with everything I did. I tried to fill in every nook and cranny and put in as much care as I could to the detailing process. Of course, with the main part of Hobbiton, I tried to detail accurately to the book in whatever way that meant. Detailing was absolutely my favorite part. I loved going through and making everything as idyllic and purposeful as possible and putting a story behind it, and there isn't a spot in the Shire that isn't very purposefully detailed. The most recent work I've done is working on all the Hobbit hole interiors because there's like 60 something Hobbit holes and it's taken me ages to get through them all. But I've recently put quite a few in, but there's still many that need interiors still, but it's been good progress. It's very satisfying to be able to go to any of these Hobbit holes and have interiors inside of them as well. I also redid the interior of Bag End during the revision process because there was a lot of changes I wanted to make it more accurate to the book. The hall and the dining room were the biggest changes. The reconstruction was mainly just the main part of Hobbiton, and there's still a lot of surrounding areas that really don't have anything to do with the book. They're just my own conjurings. I've thought about remaking the whole thing to be more book accurate, but that would require a complete reconstruction of Hobbiton. In fact, the entire thing would have to be rebuilt because there's just not enough space, and I would have to destroy so much of the work that I did around, and I just don't want to do that. It's just a stupid Minecraft recreation at the end of the day, and making the main part more accurate to the book was my main goal, and that's what I did, and I'm very satisfied with it as it is. The main structure at this point is very complete, but obviously all of the borders are very incomplete. I've left them the way they are on purpose though, because it allows me in the future to expand and build new areas and keep going if I so desire. The goal was to make it so that when you're in Hobbiton, the illusion is that you're entirely surrounded by the Shire and you can't see out of it, which has pretty much been effective. I've really enjoyed sharing this build with you guys throughout these videos. It's a lot of work to make these videos, but I really have appreciated the support tremendously because this project has been a very big deal to me, so it means a lot to have people support it and show their appreciation for it, and I hope this video has been interesting and insightful and not too crazy. This project really transformed me from being quite a terrible builder to becoming half decent in the end. Again, I'm incredibly grateful for all the support I've been shown in this channel. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I can't thank you enough. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this build as much as I've enjoyed making it, and yeah, thank you guys. With enough support, I've been thinking about starting some more projects in this world, and I would love to continue with Shire things and Shire videos if anyone has any desire to see that or has any questions. And yeah, this could be the end of our journey, but if not, I will see you guys next time.